welcome back to week 2 of our spiritual warfare discipleship module. And this week we are talking about one of our favorite things, the devil. Before we get into that though, I want to give you a framework that will help piece our study together, help guide our study. And it's this idea that the deceptive lies of the devil play to our disordered desires of the flesh that are then normalized in a sinful world. So let me say that again. The deceptive lies of the devil play to disordered desires in our flesh that are normalized in a sinful world. And this comes from John Mark Comer's book, Live No Lies, which we are borrowing from and relying on a lot in this study. Last week, I introduced us to the spiritual battle space and said there are really 3 lines of operation in it. There is the world, the flesh, and the devil. And what I want you to see is how all 3 of those things fit together. That in some ways it is the battle cycle of the devil. That as the devil's lies take root in human hearts, it affects all of society, which then opens us up to more and more lies, and so the cycle goes downward. Well, this week we are going to be looking at the devil. This is the battle space we most often associate with spiritual warfare. And what I want you to see, though, is that as we look through Scripture, the most common way that the devil works is not through spooky, scary stuff, but through lies. You'll remember last week we looked at 2 of the most important battles in all of humanity. And they weren't waged with demon possessions and exorcisms, but through lies and half-truths. I want us to first then understand the devil's tactics, and we're going to look at a series of passages here. First, John 8, 43 to 44. Jesus says, "Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies." The main contrast that Jesus sets up here is one of language. What is your native language? Is it truth or lies? And in his fall, the devil became the creator of a new language, the language of lies. Conversely, the natural tongue of God is the word of truth. And just one note about the language, the word devil here. It comes from the Greek word diablos, which means to accuse or to slander. The devil's name is the slanderer, or sometimes even translated as the accuser. Satan, the devil, is the father of all lies. All lies originate from him. And thus, one of the greatest guards against Satan's attacks is to be firmly rooted in the truth. Or as John Mark Comer puts it, our fight with the devil is first and foremost a fight to take back control of our minds from their captivity to lies and liberate them with the weapon of truth. Thus, it's not surprising that right before Jesus talks about the devil as the father of lies, he says in John 8:32, "If you hold to my teaching, you really are my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Well, what is Satan's goal that we see from this passage in John 8? It is ultimately to lead people to death. Jesus says he was a murderer from the beginning. And often the greatest way to lead people to death is through small, subtle lies. In C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, there's this scene where one demon is mentoring a younger demon, and he says this: "You will say that these are all very small sins, and doubtless, like all young tempters, you are anxious to be able to report spectacular wickedness. But do remember that the only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate the man from the enemy," which in this case is talking about God. "It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. Murder is no better than cards, if cards can do the trick. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, and without signposts." Let's look now at 2 Corinthians 11, 13, and 14. "For such people are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising, then, if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. Their end will be what their actions deserve. Again, we see that Satan often does not resort to conventional warfare. He's not parading around in a brightly colored horse with legions of demons lined up like a medieval army ready to face off against God's people. No, Satan engages in guerrilla warfare. When we see him coming, we don't immediately pick up our weapons and are on guard, but we actually think, oh great, reinforcements are headed our way. And Satan's troops operate by the same principle. We might be surprised by how eager agents of Satan are willing to help us in the causes we care about. The greatest threats to the church usually aren't the ones that come with "made from hell" stamped on the box, but are the ones wrapped in beautiful paper that's enticing to us. The greatest threats are those that come from people and places that seem to further our agendas and allows us to skip the suffering of the cross. We need to be aware that Satan is a master of guerrilla warfare. Well, let's look at 2 Thessalonians 2, 9-10. The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie, and all the ways that wickedness deceives those who are perishing. They perish because they refused to love the truth and so be saved. We see several of these recurring themes here, but this passage adds to it the idea of the power of Satan displayed through signs and wonders. But notice here in the text, are those signs and wonders an end in and of themselves? Well, no. What does the text say? Those signs and wonders serve something greater for Satan. And what is that? It's the lie. They serve to deceive others. Why are people caught up in these signs and wonders from Satan? Is it because that the signs and wonders are just too powerful and too amazing and they're drawn to them? Is it because they couldn't get an exorcism in time and are pulled away by Satan's minions? No. The text tells us they perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. So whether it's from that slow, gentle road to hell or through great displays of power, a person succumbs to the devil's onslaught because they bought into his lies. If you're only worried about overt spiritual forces, you are missing half of the battle. Satan often comes looking like a friend, offering some much needed help. And this can help us make sense of things that look much more like conventional spiritual warfare. That if the devil's ultimate goal is to get people to buy into his lie, well, he will use different tactics depending on the culture that he's in. So if he is operating in a culture where there's a strong belief in spiritual forces and evil and dark powers, it would make sense that he would take advantage of that belief in the spiritual realm to get people to believe in his lies, that he is more powerful than the light. But in the modern Western culture, where we have a skepticism of anything spiritual and spiritual forces and think it's probably a little bit silly to believe in something like the devil, well, the devil is very happy to let us buy into that lie and use very ordinary means to lead people into embracing the lie. Because awakening people to the spiritual realities might even awaken in them their need for God. And so why risk doing that when things like political division will work just as well to get people to believe his lie? As one person once said, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he doesn't exist.